Hi, everyone. Welcome to U-Turn Health. Thank you so much for tuning in today. My name is Erin Craw, and I am a strategic account manager here at U-Turn Health, working primarily with the public sector. Today, we have Michael Parker with us. Michael is a Marine Corps vet, turned cowboy, entrepreneur, and a mental health advocate. His story is extremely inspirational and raw, and we're so fortunate to have him sharing it with us today. Michael, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Aaron, for having me here.
I thought it'd be way more interactive and interesting to have you share your story. Tell us about yourself and how you got here onto our amazing podcast, sharing your story. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, background, grew up in a military family. My dad's Army. So grew up all over the place, originally from here in Arkansas. That's where all my family's from. But yeah, I guess at a really young age, I decided I was going to be a Marine. Never changed that. So after I graduated, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. Was a 6116, which means I worked on helicopters, on Ospreys in particular. That's where things kind of went sideways. As I look back now, like my understanding of mental health and everything and my own journey has developed along the way. So now I realize, a lot more about my past. But what I didn't realize then is I had underlying trauma and trauma added on to the military. And so I coped with it with sex and alcohol. Ended up getting myself into some trouble. Got discharged from the Marine Corps. I was sexually assaulted as well. So you can imagine it was a pretty dark time in my life. That was back in December 2014. And in the next year and a half, things just kind of were in a tailspin, not really going anywhere, slowly spiraling down. That was until late 2015. And preface this, I kind of knew that I knew inside that I had PTSD and, other stuff going on. But in my mind, I was like, post-traumatic stress is for combat guys. Like, there's no way. And two, I think also I just didn't want to accept that was going on. So I just kind of suppressed it. Also in there, not long after I got out, my unit went on a deployment that I was supposed to have gone on with them if I had stayed out of trouble. We lost a couple Marines, one being a really good friend of mine, and I took that hard. And so I was really struggling. I dove into alcohol, even though you would think that getting in trouble for that kind of stuff, you might turn away. I just dug deeper and really heavy alcoholic then, up until kind of that first time that I had that suicide attempt. And it was more just complete rage, to be honest. But I was just so angry. I just wanted to stab something, and ended up stabbing myself a couple times in the chest. And after that, was admitted to the hospital, diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, survivor's guilt, all that fun stuff. And that kind of began that long road to recovery. Unfortunately, it didn't start going up there. It still dipped even lower. Of course, it was counseling and medication. That was the response, or that was the solution. And I've probably been on every kind of medication they make for like antidepressants and all of that, and none of them really worked. The last medication I was on kind of helped, but the best way I can explain how I felt during that time was like if you play video games, it was like playing a third person shooter. Like I wasn't really in control of my own life, and I hated that. Ended up having 3 more suicide attempts. The last one, my grandparents actually, they noticed something was wrong. So they had followed me and actually witnessed me attempt to hang myself successfully. That's the whole thing. Nobody knows how I got down from there. I call it, divine intervention. But that was kind of my turning point, because the cops showed up, ended up getting into it with the officers that responded, ended up in jail for 60 days. And that right there was kind of like that, you got to do something or you're going to end up dead or worse. And ended up moving out to Hawaii, had a friend stationed out there, and was planning just a, maybe month or 2 out there, kind of short trip. Fell in love with it real quick. Like I said, didn't like taking the medication. So 3 weeks later, when I ran out, I was like, well, we're just done. We'll figure something else out. And that's what I did inadvertently. I say I accidentally stumbled upon my own healing. Hawaii's real beautiful. If anybody's ever been there, there's lots of mountains and lots of, oceanside activities to do. People are often surprised to find out there's actually a really rich cowboy culture there. But I started hiking and kayaking and all that. And I started to notice, the more I did it, I started to feel better. So I kept doing it more, ended up getting into working with horses. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties over
No,
here.
that's okay. That's okay. Can you hear me okay still?
Yeah.
You were talking about how as you started to do these things like hiking and spending time out in beautiful Hawaii, which I'm so jealous that you were able to live there. I've only been there for like 4 days and it was a dream. But then you started to feel better. So you started to recognize that change.
Yeah. So, I started doing it more often. I was hiking all the time, and I would just, be driving along and be like, hey, dude, that mountain looks cool. I want to hike that. And so I'd figure out where the trail was and I would hike. And so I was always hiking, always, out on the water, kayaking, snorkeling, got back into surfing, which I hadn't done since I lived in Southern California. Then I started working at a ranch. That was like, I got that, probably about 3 weeks after I got there. But I started out in zip line as a zip line tour guide, but got, very thankful for that horseback manager who took a chance on me. All I knew how to do was, I said, ride a horse. Basically, now what I know, I'm like, dude, like back then I couldn't ride a horse. I could stay on a horse, but riding was not. I wasn't very technical of a rider, but I could stay on. And she's like, well, if you can ride a horse, we can teach you everything else. And just kind of gave me a chance to dive into that world. Learned quickly and progressed real fast in that. But that's where I found a lot of the emotional control of my emotions, because anybody else worked with horses knows that you can't come at them all angry, because they reciprocate. Like they're kind of like a mirror. And so I had to learn to keep my emotions in check until next thing I know, that's how I'm interacting with regular people. My road rage wasn't near as bad as it was. Somebody cut me off and I'd just be like, it is what it is, and just let it go. And I was like, oh wow, but then I know you're going to ask about the ranch, so I'll just lead a little bit more in
Please,
my
yes.
story, and then I'll pass it back. But yeah, so that's kind of when I had that, I call it the light bulb moment. The cartoons, or the light bulb goes off above the character's head. I was out on giving a tour one day, and I was like, wow, if these things can help me so much, how many other people can this help? And then I started telling people that was my 5-year plan to be doing what we're doing now. Just sat on it for 2 years, and left that ranch, went to another ranch, worked there for about a year. So in August of 2019, I ended up losing my job there, and I was living on that ranch. So I found myself homeless and unemployed, just like that. Honestly, that wasn't too dark of a time, and don't feel bad for me. I was sleeping in a hammock on the beach, waking up to the sunrise every morning. So you guys don't feel bad for me for being homeless in Hawaii. It wasn't that bad. But I'll kind of stop there and let you ask any questions you got.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you so much for providing such a rich and in-depth description of the path that you've been on. And it's absolutely impressive to see where you're at now and everything that you're doing and how you've kind of, fueled, so to speak, all of this trauma and this hardship that you've gone through to now be helping individuals. And, when you talk about the ranch, I could just see you lighting up. And, I know we've talked about this before, even this podcast, and I just know the passion that's behind all of the work that you do. So I would love to talk a little bit about how you transitioned from experiencing such incredible difficulty in becoming this mental health advocate. How does that happen? How did you go through that kind of transition into someone who now dedicates their life to helping other people who are really deeply struggling as well? And I know a lot of that is storytelling, and you're so open to a lot of that. But talk to me more about becoming this mental health advocate who's, so out there and really helping people.
Yeah, I guess I don't know exactly what provoked it, but I remember the first time I kind of opened up about stuff, and it was around suicide. And I think I had lost somebody to suicide, and I remember seeing a lot of stuff on Facebook, and so um, that was one of the first times I really kind of opened up and started talking about that. And that was probably my first advocacy is a Facebook video where I talked about my journey, about my suicide attempts and my struggle. And I did it for two reasons. One, if people tell you, when you're struggling, people tell you all the time, oh, it'll be okay. And most of them haven't been in that darkness. And you're like, what do you know? But when you can say, hey, look, I've been in that same place, people are like, oh, well, you made it through, then maybe I can make it through too. So you get that credibility with those people going through it. But two, I wanted people that had never experienced that to kind of understand what it was that we're going through, right? And it scared me to death to step out that first time and admit all of that. But then, I had people reaching out to me like, hey, dude, I'm struggling with this. Thank you for saying that. And I even had people who had lost loved ones to suicide who were like, I never could understand why my father or whoever, did that. And to hear you say, where you were at, it really helped. And so I don't like doing podcasts. I'm gonna be honest. I don't like sharing my story, personally, because it scares me, right? I'm putting all of my dirty laundry out there. But why I do it is because I've always, I guess, had that passion to serve and to help people. And so if me sharing my story, me being vulnerable, laying it all on the line helps one person, even just one person, to me, that's worth it. And so, I kind of kept doing more. And so storytelling, definitely huge. I have a whole podcast doing that, just getting people to share their stories. I know personally, when I was struggling and deeper in that darkness, I didn't want to share my story because I was like, who wants to hear my story? It's nothing exciting. And then, people start relating to it. And I've come to realize we all have a story. And sometimes we tell ourselves our story doesn't matter. It's not important, but it is. Every story matters. And I want people to see that. I want people to be able to share their stories. And two, there's healing in sharing your story. When you open up, it gives it less power over you. And the more you share it, the less and less power it has. and you're able to step, out of that victim uh, mindset into a mindset of power. You're able, um, I say, instead of letting it drag you down, you use it as a stepping stone, right?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for again being so vulnerable with us. And I know telling a story is has to be so incredibly difficult, and you do it with such grace. So I am so appreciative, and I'm sure every listener is of what you've given us in terms of that. And I'll make sure any listener right now can be able to link to your podcast and hear additional stories and be a part of that as well. And I know you talked a little bit about kind of the traditional approach when you were deeply struggling, medications, being on a lot of different ones, kind of testing them out, therapy. And now you're at the point where you're working on a ranch that really provides a space for people to uh, work through a lot of what they're struggling with. Can you talk a little bit about that as opposed to more of, let's say, the more traditional, go to a treatment center or go on medication? So how does this kind of fit in, or how is it different than that? And talk a little bit about what people do on the ranch when they're there.
Well, so still working on getting land for a ranch. I know it's kind of misleading that it's in the title, but one of these days, hopefully in the very near future, we'll have some land. But I do healing retreats, so camping retreats for veterans and first responders. And um, I'm not knocking medication. It didn't work for me, but I know people that it's saved their lives, right? And for some people, it's not a long-term solution, but it's a temporary thing. Like it works temporarily until you can transition into finding something that works more long-term. So
Sure.
nothing against that. I hope nobody thinks I'm saying, hey, no, medication's bad. Talking to a counselor's bad. No, I'm not saying any of that. That just wasn't what works best for me.
Right.
And that's the thing. What works for me might not work for somebody else, and what works for somebody else might not work for me. And that's what I do, is just trying to expose people to as many different resources, or I call them, tools in the tool belt, adding different tools that they can have access to. And that's what we do on the retreats, is get them engaged in different kind of outdoor recreational activities, which all have a therapeutic healing property to them. And that way those guys can figure out what works for them, what doesn't, and they can start implementing those into their healing journey. I introduce them to other resources, like a bunch of different books to kind of help them along. And like 22-0, I work with them. They come out, talk about what they're doing, and even offer to work with some of the guys there at the retreat. And that's the whole thing. Is just, I guess my biggest thing is, a lot of people view us as broken or damaged goods, or people think we need fixing. And my belief is we don't need fixing. We're not broken. We just need guidance and direction sometimes. And that's all I'm here to do, is give them the tools to be successful, point them in the right direction, and help them get on their way. Because one thing I've learned through my own journey is people want to help. People can give you all the resources available, but ultimately, if you're not willing to accept that and take the action for yourself, then you're never going to get where you want to go. Like you have to be invested in your own healing. And sometimes, we help people and they weren't really ready and they go back to struggling. I used to kind of get upset by that, but now I realize, that's not on me. I did everything I can. But when those people are ready, hey, they still have those tools. They know that these things are out there and that they can use them.
I loved your conversation too about this idea of multiple pathways of recovery, right? It doesn't have to be, maybe it is the traditional path and maybe it is medication, or maybe it's a mix of all of these things, and just giving an opportunity for these individuals to have another pathway of potential, a potential route to get them to that point of living a more healthy and positive lifestyle. And I think what you're really highlighting nicely is this concept of enhancing perceptions of control, and to kind of give that person put them back in the driver's seat, so to speak, of their own life, because that has to be such a challenging part of struggling, especially in that kind of state where you're not sure yet if you're even ready, right? And so you feel that lack of control. And so I love that piece of what you were saying about making sure that they kind of get to a point of I'm in control. I have the self-efficacy, so to speak, of I can do this. I have the ability to persevere and to find a point of wellness. And so my last question for you is more so about I know you work specifically with veterans, which makes a lot of sense given your background and your experiences, and first responders as well. So talk to me a little bit, if you don't mind, about those specific populations and how you can kind of get over some of the common barriers to helping those individuals that are likely more part of a overly masculine, so to speak, culture. I know there's a lot of barriers to getting help when you're in those professions because you are so fixated on helping other people, and you're one of them, right? I know that you are someone who's so passionate about making sure that you're helping others. So how do you help those individuals who are so dedicated to spending their life helping others and might not spend the time helping themselves?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I avoid words like therapy and stuff like that, because those are instant walls that go up. And I think a lot of the hardest part is it's in both environments. It's a cultural thing. In the military and my conversations with a lot of law enforcement and public service, professions, you hear it the same thing is, you're taught not to be vulnerable. There's reasons to not admit that you need help. Like for law enforcement, there's the constant fear that they might lose their badge and gun,
Desk duty, sure.
and and in the military, you're worried that if you say that you need help, it's going to impact you getting a promotion or being able to stay in, and this or the way other people view you, right? So there's that stigma around it, and we're also taught that it's not okay to be vulnerable. Like vulnerability is a weakness. In certain senses, yes, I can see that, but when it comes to like your mental health and taking care of yourself, being vulnerable is actually a great strength. When you can say that you need help, that takes courage, that takes strength. But a lot of the issue is just getting past the stigma, and so that's why I just presented as, hey, one thing that we all miss is camaraderie. So hey, come have some camaraderie with some other guys out on a camping retreat, have some fun, and that's exactly what we're going to do. But hey, you might get some healing out of it too, and make new friendships, people that you can lean on going forward in everyday life, that can be there to support you when you're having those rough days, because we're not supposed to do life alone. And in the veteran and first responder communities, like those bonds are really strong, and it's very useful and helpful to tie back into those.
So it sounds like really empowering again these group of individuals to feel like you're coming together to once again help each other and be a part of something that's bigger than them, but to really feel a sense of connection and that camaraderie that they've likely experienced in their own departments even, but makes it difficult sometimes to seek support in their own wherever they're working. So providing a space and out in the beautiful where did you say it is again? It's Arkansas, or you're from Arkansas?
I live in Arkansas. I do
Okay,
some retreats here.
got it.
But the nice thing is I can do them all over the place.
Oh,
Uh,
fantastic. Okay.
Recently just did one down in Texas, and half of the ones I've got planned for this year are all over the country.
All
So
scattered. Okay.
yeah.
Great. So just finding various different places across the US. And I think too what you had highlighted in your own story was just finding peace and being outside and being a part of nature and focusing on that rather than some of the things that you may be struggling with, and finding a way to kind of work through it at your own pace in your own way, using the beauty of nature. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything, Michael, that I missed or that you think is important to highlight about your story or your ranch and what you're doing and the different retreats?
Uh, I would just say, for anybody that's listening, like if you're struggling, don't have to be a veteran or first responder. Uh, the hardest part is acknowledging and accepting, that you need help. But reaching out and getting, just support, right? Like, for me, I didn't want anything to do with the veteran community, but guess who had my back? My brothers and sisters, even though I didn't want anything to do with that. So it's important to find that those people that support you, and just it's never too late. Like, I don't care what you've been through or what you've done, because trust me, I've been through a lot and I've done a lot of bad things in my life. But you can always start today and work on being better. And you don't have to do it all at once. Day by day, just a little bit at a time. I would say aim to be 1% better each day. And, over a year, you're going to be a completely different person. So that's just a little bit of wisdom I would leave with anybody. If you don't like where you're at, go change it. Don't have to be drastic, little steps, but making that first step's the biggest one.
Well, thank you so much for leaving that with us. And your story is so incredibly powerful. I'm sure everyone listening is feeling really inspired by just the amazing story that you have and where you're at now and how much you're helping people. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And we are so excited to see what you continue to do.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Michael.